Hello, boys and girls. This is Miss Bowen. I have an art project for you to try this week. I was trying to think of something sunny, bright, and cheerful, even though the weather might not be doing that outside every day. My idea came from Mexican art, and what we're going to focus on is some folk art suns. You'll notice that there's a face in the middle. I'm going to show you how to make that out of foil and cardboard, and then you'll see that there's rings of patterns around it. Here are some Mexican suns to look at. The ones on the left are considered folk art. You'd find them in Metepec, Mexico. Folk art is typically bright and colorful and has lots of patterns. These suns are made out of clay and usually always have a face in the center. The artwork on the right is an ancient Aztec calendar. The Aztec are a people of Mexico, and the intricate designs that are carved into this clay mark different times of the year, like days and months. I'll be talking about two words today, balance and symmetry, and they have to do with how we're going to create our design. Symmetry means that your artwork is even and equal. If you look at these pictures below, when you divide them down the middle, you see that they're the same on both sides. That's showing symmetry. But what we'll talk about today is called rotational symmetry. That means no matter which way you turn your design or your artwork, it will look the same all around. Rotational symmetry is something that you might see in nature. Rotational symmetry is often seen in different types of artwork, where you might see shapes or colors or lines repeated in a way where it's turning around like a clock. Even if it's a square piece of artwork, it's still repeating in different directions. Okay, to get ready to make your folk art sun, we need some supplies. In your home, if you could find a paper plate or cardboard, that's going to give you some stiffer material to work with. You'll also want to look for some paper. It could be white printer paper, or you might want to use some colored construction paper if you want more color in your artwork. If you can find scissors, pencil, and glue, that will help you create your project. You'll also want to look for some aluminum foil or tin foil and coloring supplies. Here's a look at the different sizes of paper we're going to be making, and all of them you'll see are a circle. We're going to be making a large, medium, and small size. First, we'll start with the large circle. Here you can see I've taken the paper plate and I've traced it onto my construction paper and cut it out. If you don't have a paper plate, you could probably use a real plate from the cupboard, and you don't have to use color paper like construction paper. It could be just white paper. You want something that's large enough to fill up most of the paper to trace, and then cut out your circle. Next, you'll want to make your medium-sized circle. You need it to be a little bit smaller than your large circle. Here you'll see that I've made mine with blue paper. Or if you don't have colored paper, you'll see that I traced it right in the center of my big white circle. You'll have to look for something to trace to give you a nice smooth circle. Here, instead of a plate, I used a bowl. The last circle to make is your smallest circle. What I traced here was a cup, and I wanted to trace it on stiffer paper. So here you see that I made it out of the paper plate because it's a little bit thicker than printer paper or construction paper. If you don't have a paper plate, here on the bottom, I tore up a cereal box and used the cardboard from the cereal box to make my smallest circle. If you don't have either of these materials, just trace a cup in the center of your medium circle. We're going to be starting to think about what the face in the middle of your folk art sun will look like. I wanted you to take a look at this artist here. His name is Kimmy Cantrell. He makes abstract faces, which means they're not very realistic, they're more cartoonish, and he makes his out of clay. You'll see that it looks like he attaches different shapes and pieces and puts it all together to look like a face. He also then adds some fun patterns and colors to give it a little more detail. Before you build the face for your son, let's do some brainstorming first. On a scrap paper, take your cup that you use to make your small circle and trace it about 3 times. Once you have the 3 circles traced, you'll want to think about what kind of ideas can you come up with for the face? What shapes would you like to use for the different features, like the eyes, nose, mouth, eyebrows, cheeks, eyelashes? You might want to turn back to this picture, as our artist could give you some very good ideas. Or you can be creative and come up with shapes out of your own imagination. Here's an example of 3 different ideas that I came up with. Once you have different ideas drawn on your paper, you'll want to pick your best idea that you'd like to move forward with for your project. Once you know what the face is going to look like, it will be much easier for you to cut and glue it. We're gluing those smaller shapes like a second layer on top of the paper plate or the cardboard. All I did was use the scraps from my paper plate or the scraps from my cardboard, because you'll see that those shapes are much smaller. And then I carefully glued them as a top layer. Later on, when we cover this face with foil, it's the pieces that are glued on top are going to make it look like the whole thing was carved. Here you see that I've attached a small piece of foil on top of the circle once the face was glued on. You don't need too big of a piece of foil, but you want it big enough to cover the circle. I put plenty of glue on the back of the foil. I laid it on top of the face. I trimmed around the circle and glued the extra foil to the back of the circle. And then you'll see in the bottom, I'm smoothing out the foil so that I can really see the shapes that I put on the circle for the face. So the more time you spend smoothing with your finger, the better the face is going to show up. And it makes it look like the face is carved out of metal, even though you used other materials to make it. When your face is all complete, you'll want to glue it to the very center of your stacked circles. You'll want to stack your circles from large, medium to small. Or if you don't have the materials to create that foil face, you'll want to make sure the face is in the center of the medium circle. You could just draw it if you didn't have cardboard or a paper plate or foil. Now we're going to divide up our project so that we can add some patterns and practice that rotational symmetry. On the top, you'll see that I first started with 4 lines, a top, bottom, right, and left line. Next, I added 4 more lines to give me 8, and I was just trying to go in between my first 4 lines so that I could put my outer ring with lines that are evenly spaced. I looked for the spaces that my 8 lines created on my medium circle, and I put a dot in the very center on the edge of that circle in each space. This is helping me get ready to add my lines to my largest section, my largest circle. Once I have the sections divided on each size circle, the medium and the large, I'm starting to think of patterns to add. You can start simple with just a shape or a line, but make sure you're using your rotational symmetry. You repeat it all the way around the same each time. That way, when you turn it, it looks the same no matter which way. You can keep it as a simple shape or line, or you could add extra designs. As you can see, I've started from a circle, then I added smaller circles to go with it, or I started with a zigzag and added some dotted lines. Then you'll move on to your largest circle and think of a line or shape pattern to add there. You can use just shapes, just lines, or mix and match both. Again, repeat it in every section around the same way each time. It might even help you to turn your circle each time you move on to a new section, turning it like a wheel or a clock. Once your design is drawn in, you could choose how you want the color to look. Maybe you just trace it with black marker and leave it as nice black lines. Maybe you color in each and every shape that you've created. But when you're choosing the color, make sure you're also using symmetry there. You'll notice that in every section I colored them the same way, but you can use whichever coloring supplies you have available and you decide how those colors should look. You're the artist. When your project is all finished and complete, you have a nice, bright, cheerful piece of artwork to hang in your home and brighten up any room. You can hang it on the fridge, hang it on a wall. It's a nice, happy, cheerful piece. I hope you have fun creating your artwork and you can always make more. Keep watching for more art projects from me, Miss Bowen, to try right in your own home.